Hey, how are you doing? Something a bit different this week. So, inspired by Warlord Games survey the other week, asked some followers of the channel some questions that I could answer and mull over and get your input in as well on the channel. So, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on some of these as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to crack on with some of the questions. So, first up, when did I begin wargaming, and what do I miss about it then compared to now? So, I'd say it started about 1988-ish. Certainly, the first wargaming magazine I picked up was White Dwarf issue 120. I think that's got an 88 cover date, October 88. I also bought along back then War Games Illustrated and Miniature War Games. What do I miss? So I kind of miss the Unknown Horizons. Everything is so available now, and it's never been easier to get hold of information. So find out about new things. I think that's always the most exciting part of any hobby. But also it covers stores as well. Finding a new hobby shop, not knowing exactly what they're going to stock, finding unusual ranges and unusual places. And now when you finally find a hobby shop, everything seems to be a lot more homogeneous. You pretty much can guarantee you'll see X range, Y range, Z range, the couple of paints, brushes, etc. So yeah, so getting out and finding those oddities and stuff around the country. I was fortunate enough actually to go to university in the mid 90s, Huddersfield. So got over to Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, and always finding odd wee shops to get involved in. In fact, Darlington, where I'm from, we had Total Fantasy, which stocked all sorts of stuff. Anyway, question two: any period that does not interest me, and what period would I like to see better represented? So every period interests me. I've got a mad passion for military history, and every conflict there's something interesting that happened, uniforms, tactics, the stories of the people involved, and that's the thing that really grabs me about there. And there's nothing I've looked at that, no, I've got no interest in that, move on. There's periods where I've had to go out and actively find more books, resources, etc. So, for example, I recently picked up the Warlord Games Bronze Age Warfare supplement because I realised I didn't actually know that much about the Bronze Age period. So, yeah, that. So I actively hunt out and seek periods and find out more information. Better represented. So there's three sort of periods of things that's always be passionate to me that I've always liked. Conquistadors, Boxer Rebellion, and World War One. And War Games Atlantic seems to be tapping into my mind. So Boxer Rebellion from 55 Days in Peking, and a great article in one of the early War Games Illustrated magazines about the Legation Siege. Always loved. So doing something like that in 28. I've actually got some of the 15mm stuff from Old Glory, which got to paint up. But yeah, it's actually good. World War One, getting some stuff in plastic, kind of skirmishing on a battlefield. The Warhammer Historical Great War books. Love it. I've got 15mm World War One. But yeah, something nice in 28 would be great. And Conquistadors have always fascinated me. And yet, Warlord Atlantic, War Games Atlantic, sorry, putting out some Conquistadors and some Aztecs, backed up with the Assault Group Metals as well. Job's done. That'd be more skirmishy. Maybe I'm thinking about adapting the Lord of the Rings rules, which I think is a great set of skirmish rules. Third question: metal or plastic? So I'm going to give a cop-out answer. Why not both? Plastic in bulk I like. Metal specials, obviously plastic bulk you're going to get for cheaper, 28mm. For years I never thought I would do 28mm Napoleonic Army, and then I was like, after finishing my 6mm, I was like, yeah, I really like the uniforms on 28mm. Why not go for it? It's easily achievable. That said, whatever metal or plastic, or resin for that matter, it has to come down to good sculpts. I'm not going to pick a material over another because I like it if the sculpts are bad. For me, War Games Factory is an example of a poor sculpt that Warlord Games picked up their stuff. I think they're Samurai and their War of Independence. Those just don't gel with us. And actually, for the future, metal or plastic, epic battles. That's looking really good. I think if they did the plastics in strips of 5, and just everything in strips of 5, so you can either combine them for the bigger units or have them for the smaller units, that would absolutely take over the sort of this 15, 12mm market. And the question in the Wargame survey was, what black powder period would you like to see in epic battle scale? I would say, does it have to be black powder? Could we not do some pike and shot? And could we not do English Civil War? Same idea with the uniforms on both sides. And I think, pike block with the sleeves of shot would be awesome. But anyway, cracking on. Fourth question, what scales for which time period suits best? So I think it's best to consider what you want to achieve on the tabletop and scale to match. There's a reason why, if I really decide to wargame a period, I generally have different scales. So Napoleon's got 28 6mm, World War II have got 28 and 10, Ancients have got 28 and 6, for example. I'll do World War 1 and 15 and 28 war games Atlantic. And it gives us what I want. Larger scale with my Napoleonics, a 28 gives me that uniform joy, whereas a 6mm allows me to field the entire Waterloo battle. And what you want to achieve on the tabletop was also looking at World War II up to company level. 28mm works. Where you got 30 to 100 models on the table, that works. But if what you want to do is like real division conflict, then you're going to have to go smaller, so you can get that on the tabletop. You can get that working for normal actions, operations. So the scale also fits to your space. My 28mm Napoleonic, I've got a 6x4 table, so I can get about 12 battalions on the table with a bit of artillery and a bit of cavalry in support. Though I said earlier, I've also got Waterloo, so I can fight the entire Waterloo battle in 6mm. That's a choice of what I want to do, what I want to field, and pick the right rules for that as well. And I mentioned kind of uniforms as well. I think uniforms are important with scale. So, for example, I love the American Civil War, as you know, for following the channel. Though the uniforms don't set my world alight. So every time I've done the American Civil War in the past, it's always been 15s or 12mm or 10mm. Because I get what I want out of the uniforms there, but it's not lavishing attention on it like you might with Napoleonic uniforms. So looking ahead, I've had an inkling to do the Franco-Prussian War. I managed to visit a load of French military museums on my holidays. So what I'll probably end up doing is 10mm for the mass battles, but also some Perrys for kind of skirmishing, bigger scale stuff, so I can enjoy painting and looking and researching those uniforms, but just have a general feel for it with the 10mm stuff. Question number 5, what's more fun, historical battles, what ifs, or more match play points games? So just like my previous questions, I'm going to say a blend of all three. Depends what you want to do. So for me, Antietam is going to be a big game I'm aiming for with my epic battle stuff. And it's a battle that appeals to me. You've got the Confederates defending. Union should overwhelm them. Can the Confederates manage to get that line held and hold off the Union? Can the Union get it together, push them off the field? What ifs? For me, a what if is about you capturing the spirit of a conflict with the resources you've got. So certainly for my Napoleonic stuff, with my 28s, it's peninsula based. So with that, we kind of do some battles roughly based on some of the sharp engagements, building into the books and stuff we've got. Or you might have, I don't know, not necessarily the order of battle for a historical battle, but something approaching it and you can adapt and amend how you want. I also wonder, what would happen if you maybe did something with Waterloo but reversed the armies on the battlefield, so you've got different tactical challenge with the armies. And I know much of the success at Waterloo was down to Wellington's picking of the battlefield. But also match play, it's pretty good for, by match play I'm saying you've got 1,000 points, 1,250 point army. It's really good for meeting strangers or casual play or something that's easy to set up and organise down a club. It also gives players an opportunity and an easy way to plan and structure their forces and let them know what a force would look like or feel like. And that's something I love in wargaming, is looking at the army lists and thinking about how I can use the army lists to make history come alive. And that's generally the thing I look for most in a set of rules. first in a set of rules is what are the army lists like? And match play can also incorporate some great scenario points as well, and stuff you do before the battle to create a scenario for the game ahead. So I'm thinking there, Peter Pig system. So Peter Pig system, you assign some points in different categories, and they'll give different bonuses for the battle. They'll decide attacker and defender, and how your reserves handle, and some other things like ammunition and stuff. And it sets up a strong story, objectives, and also adapts your forces. You might not quite get the forces you want to on the battlefield. And I'm working on something we planned for Black Powder as well, so some pre-game scenario generation, which I'll cover more of in a later video. Cool. Question 6, and I've actually got some props for this. So, are current rule sets too intimidating for beginners? So, I'm going to, again, it's going to be a yes and a no. So, traditionally, when I started, War Games rules looked like this. 7th edition, DBA, and these fellas. And what you generally had, just opening up, and tables, tight text, tables. You're lucky at the back if you had a couple of hand-drawn diagrams explaining stuff. Falling apart, copy I've picked up. There you go. Same typewriter text. Typewriter text. Well, there's a table. DBA. DBA was really interesting because that's 20 pages and that's 180 army lists. I mean, DBA is what, 12 elements a side. Dead simple, dead easy. Dead easy to get into. So for a beginner, regardless what it looks like, DBA was dead easy. Other stuff becomes impenetrable. Then, kind of as the 90s rolled on, we started getting some better looking books. So this is Fantasy Rules 2nd edition, one of my favourite fantasy sets of rules. And starting to get better photographs showing stuff off. Better examples of play. It was a big set of rules. This was to came out. Well, it says 2010, but I'm pretty sure that Peter Pig's kind of rule sets have been of a format for a while. Now, the modern rule books, and I've got a few to example, look gorgeous, where we've come to full colour. But actually, it's still a lot of text, but the text is a lot more digestible than in previous ones. If you compare these sort of paragraphs and stuff and ease of finding stuff compared to that tight stuff from the first one I showed. Supplements, nice art, full colour. Warlord and Offspring is really knocked out of the park. And again, Black Powder, 2nd edition. Much more easier to read. Not necessarily easier to understand. I've commented before on Black Powder where sometimes we use first editions at 10 words where maybe 2 would suffice. Now we're down to about 5 words where 2 would suffice. But actually, you've got other rule sets which, if you pick this up as a start, it's fairly detailed and potentially impenetrable as well. I think what we could do better is look at starter sets that are starter sets and how we talk about not just understanding the rules or providing the rules in a starter set with 2 forces, but also talk about how we use that models, how we create that and make it easier for a beginner to get involved that way. Because not every beginner is going to start off with friends, and not every beginner is going to start off with a ready-made gaming group. So what scale of figures for beginners? So I'd say with that we've got to remove our preconceptions about scale when we're talking to beginners and think about what do they want and what appeals to them. So for me, as a wee lad getting into historical gaming, it was micro armor and mass battles that appeals to me. So I probably started my historical gaming with 6mm. Irregular miniatures and heroics and Ros were what I did. In the club, there was loads of 15mm 7-Year War. I remember being particularly popular, and 28mm, 25mm as it was then. War Games Rules 7th edition. Now with beginners, 28mm plastic is perhaps the easiest. It's these days. So it's easier available. Color guides, easy to assemble, user friendly, cheapest chips. But yeah, it could be down to individual preference, and why try and force a round peg through a square hole? That would probably go square peg round hole. But you know what I'm saying. Question number 8. Should future rule sets include more solo play options? Great question. I think the answer is yes. However, a game that works solo is very different to one designed for 2 or more players. And by that, I like games that have mechanics that create decision points. So for example, Bolt Action does that. Every time you pull a dice out the bag, it's a decision point. You have something to make, and you are chopping and changing between the players. And mastery of that will make you better on the tabletop. It doesn't work that well solo play, because you pull a dice out, your plans and your tactics and the interplay of making decisions, or maybe bluffing and stuff, doesn't quite work the same. Now, actually, with Bolt Action, one of the things I want to try is throwing a couple of pebbles or different coloured dice, and if both of them come out turn ends, so it creates a bit of emphasis to crack on with your battle plan. But anyway, so decision points, like I play a lot of Staffley Battles Federation and Federation Commander, and with that, again, when you choose to fire and stuff does matter, and I've just find when I've tried to do it solo play, it's not as rewarding as playing against a real person and trying to outfox them. Now, solo play works. There's a couple of ways that solo play could work. The first one is what I'd call two-handed. It's a card gaming term, and you command both sides. So that really works well with a game like an I Go You Go system. And basically, when you finish your turn, you put your other cap on, walk around the table, and you command your force from the other side. And actually, Black Powder works really well with that, because you've then got the inbuilt friction where your army might not work the way you'd want it to work. And I think Black Powder works really well as a solo play two-handed system. The other option, and I do have the rule set, but I've not used it yet, is where you've got a pre-programmed opponent. And I've seen this, like say, Mr. Babbage from The Men Who Will Be King. I think I'll prefer a two-handed approach. But yeah, do I think rules should have more solo play options? Yes. Maybe there's a need there that we as a community can develop some sort of universal way of solo play, like a universal Mr. Babbage or adapt a Mr. Babbage type system. But yeah, lots of rules can be adapted. You just may not get the best result from your favorite set of rules, so you might need to pick. If you're going to do some solo play, you might need to pick a set of rules, basically I Go You Go, with variations of that to get the best out of, say, a two-handed solo play, than say one where there's lots of decision points where you don't get the best out of engaging with those decision points. Is historical gaming dying, or is this a golden age? I wish I had £1 for every time I'd heard this asked. I think right now we've been in a golden age, and every time I think about it, we've always been in a golden age of wargaming. Wargaming keeps getting better. Historical gaming keeps getting better. And right now it's never been easier to meet people, share hints and tips, view ranges, check stuff out on the internet, ask for people's advice, join in with Facebook groups. Actually, the industry's output is massive. So many different companies producing rules, games, miniatures, add-ons. That's even before we start looking at and thinking about 3D printing, which is a massive whole thing. And the impact on that on the industry itself is going to be really fascinating to watch. And yeah, I think historical gaming's had a bit of a boost through lockdown. Lots of people's been painting, engaging with projects, something to do. It's been a great hobby to do when you're stuck inside. Now, as things start opening up, people's going to want to start playing with all the stuff that they were painting, and that's going to lead to more as people start gaming, enjoying themselves again, chatting to their friends in the flesh, getting inspired again. So I think it is, yeah. So the wargaming and gaming in general has never been bigger. The pool keeps growing. It's more socially acceptable, be it from the influence of, say, Games Workshop, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons, etc. Campaign for Africa appearing on Big Bang Theory as a board game, for example. And yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats. I think this is a golden age, but I think every time we think about it, we keep standing on the shoulders of giants. Do I think historicals are becoming less popular to science fiction and fantasy? The answer, I think, is no. But I think the boundaries are becoming blurred, and that's healthier. I remember the first War Games Club I went to, there's a very much a divide between the historical older crowd and the fantasy younger crowd. It actually led to a division and there was some crossover, but led to a division and a split in the club. Actually, when we were on holiday, come back and the club had split. That was a Scattered Remains War Games Club in Darlington. Yeah, pretty sad when it happened. But I don't think, I think the boundaries are becoming blurred, and it's becoming okay to do both and engage with both. Certainly, as the younger guys, those teenagers of the 90s and now the 40-somethings of the new age, we carry both with us. Little Wars TV, mighty standard bearers of historical gaming, have done a video on Star Wars game. Why not both? And yet, plastic boxes with wargaming poses. Obviously, there was plastics available back in the 90s, but it was like the Airfix, Italiaria models and stuff, and sometimes those models were just in awkward poses for wargaming. But now we've got plastic boxes with wargaming poses. It's never been easy to just jump in and have a go. And again, like I said earlier, a rising tide lifts all ships. So running huge games and umpiring. So a couple of questions about this, and I think the reason why these come up is one of my play groups, we're going to be putting on a big game of Black Powder, Napoleonic. Some of us involved were in the Great Game a couple of years ago. So it was what was my tips for running huge games and umpiring. So first up, understand everybody wants fun. That might look differently for other people. You've got a bit of a balance act to make, and your idea of fun might be different to their idea of fun. So you have to be fun, engaging, put on a show, neutral, and just have a think about where people are coming from, if there is any friction on the day on a personal level. Know your brief. So if you're running a game, you need to know those rules. You're going to need to know the most commonly common rules, clashes that come up, be prepared to answer them. Know the stuff, keep things moving. Be consistent. If you say this is the interpretation we're going with, that's the interpretation all day. Provide handouts with any rules changes or key scenario pieces that every player has access to it. There's nothing worse than being at a game or event and there's rumours of some rules changes going on, and some people know and some people don't, and it just gets a bit awkward. That mainly comes with scenario packs and stuff. Especially since I can bet you bottom dollar some of you players turn up late and don't get briefed on it at the start with everybody. That was this guy at the Great Game, had to go work the first part of the Saturday morning, so didn't get there till lunchtime on the Saturday, and I was like, whoa. So it's a bit jumping in, a bit overwhelming, and I'd missed some of the briefing on rules. Keep the action moving. Set time limits. Great Game was good because it was 20-minute turnaround. If stuff hasn't finished by the end of those 20 minutes, it doesn't get done. Set a pace, keep a pace going. And pick a rule set that supports a large game. So Black Powder, individuals, give your orders, roll the dice. Does it happen? Does it not? I go, you go works really well with big games. Games where you're pulling dice out of the hat, like bolt action, or turning cards for activation, that becomes more trickier with more people. What you tend to find is people would stand around and nothing happens while they wait for other stuff to happen. Yeah, keep the players, keep it timed, keep it I go, you go, and keep it moving. Talk to players in advance and make sure you're all on the same page with what you're going to do, what you're going to offer, what you're going to do with forces. And again, you can do pre-briefing with rules, etc., and factor in some breaks. A day of gaming is very draining, so yeah, make sure you plenty of breaks for hydration and stuff, and that will cut out people having to disappear for I think it's called comfort breaks at work. Question 11: what value are one-page rules? At the core, most rules are one-page rules. Well, two sides of A4. They just get extended out and explained and explained and explained, and caveat and caveat and caveat to put in. So one-page rules is basically the core mechanics without all that explanation in. So if you do have a one-page rules, they need not be poor, but expect a bit of working around yourself. And that's not always a bad thing. You know, getting into the guts of a rule system and tinkering with it or interpreting it the way you and your play group want to play, nothing wrong with that. I heartily encourage it. How to simplify change black powder for a big game. Now, you were talking about big games earlier. So I'm going to cover this in another video. I'll do some videos on the big game and the organisation. I'm going to be rebasing my force, for example, and I'll be talking about some of the pulling at black powder coming up. And finally, last question, lucky number 13. How do I feel about bot action or other historical games being used for competitive gaming? Do I feel it's disrespectful to the people who fought in the conflicts? Now, this is an angle I've never thought about before, and I know some people don't do 20th century or later wargaming because it's too close to home. Now, my initial thoughts on this is it's something I've chatted at length about, not on the channel, but with other people, about symbols from history being placed in their context and not used to glorify issues. So I never think we should shy away from our past or shy away from history, but the bad guys should always be the bad guys, and we should be wary of modern politics glamorizing symbols of hatred and oppression and all the crazy humor that goes along with that, but isn't humor, but is humor when people are pushing agendas. And I think we should be mindful of other people when we're approaching history, which might be triggering, if that's not too strong a word for other people. American Civil War is a classic example of that. You know, as an outsider looking into America, there's a lot of modern political pressures going on there with people, and the Confederate flag is a symbol of something, and it'll mean different things to different people, so you've got to be mindful of that. But actually, is it disrespectful to the people who fought in those conflicts? So I guess my thoughts on it are I'm okay with it. I know many serving personnel and veterans, and I do have a bit of military service in my family, and the serving personnel and veterans who play, they seem to be okay with it. And like I said before, I always caution history with I always caution to treat history with respect. At a table at an event, before you make potentially off-kilter jokes or remarks, consider your audience. I think the core concept of war entertainment has moved on since the 90s or 80s or 70s. And as long as it's not gratuitous and respectful, then I see no issues in tabletop conflicts. So actually what we see at a tournament, backed up with that, is generally the people involved in the tournament, people like us at Wargame, we've studied history, we've looked at history, we've looked at the conflicts, we understand, we're probably more in tune with what happened on an individual personal level because of the books we've read and the research we've done than a lot of society. And knowledge is always a powerful thing, and I've never served in the military, but the stuff I read, it allows me to appreciate the lot of the humble soldier, and it gives me a lot of respect for what soldiers have to go through. Now, there might be a thing to discuss in the rules about whether some troops were as good as we were led to believe. Certainly that came up in our group. We had a discussion about, well, were the SS as good a troops as what most rules present them as? But that's probably another discussion for another day. But like I say, as long as history is portrayed on the tabletop accuracy and we're not trying to push different agendas through it or glorify certain units, and we understand that the bad guys are the bad guys, then I've got no issue with any wargaming being done on the tabletop. So that was 13 questions. That's actually really fun and really interesting to think about, and it's quite fun answering those questions, and some of them got me thinking about things. Now, if you have any thoughts to share, and you might have some thoughts especially about that last question, number 13, I'd love to hear them and chat about them. As you see, I normally do chat in the comments section. This has been a much longer video than I anticipated. Whereas if I do this again, I might limit it to seven videos, do it in half the time. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to chatting to you. I hope you have a great day, and look forward to seeing you again.